Your brain and your mind are your greatest assets as a trader. Together, they are the most powerful weapon in your arsenal. But are you using them effectively, optimally, and to their fullest effect? Your capital, your systems, and your processes may be the warheads you deploy in the markets, but it's your brain which is the system that deploys them, and your mind is the tool that observes, senses, and then makes the choices when to launch, and manages the battle and the allocation and timing of resource utilisation in that battle. But all too often, traders are worn down in that battle. Their mind slowly becomes suboptimal, and their brain slowly switches off. You can do something about it, and you should be aware that you can do something about it. Otherwise, you end up becoming the victim and not the victor. But it is incredibly hard to do yourself. In this week's Alpha Mind podcast, my guest is my usual co-host, Mark Randall, who will be talking about the weaponizing of the trader's mind. Before we start, just a few excerpts which will give you a sense of what we have coming up.
The problem is that these traders that have got this frustration have spent too much time designing their warhead and not enough time to designing the whole weapon system and launch platform from which that warhead is being deployed. If you're working so close to something, you're kind of locked in with your seatbelt into your role. And actually, the smart people have a seatbelt that they unclick every now and then. They get out of their seat and they, can do something else. It's the people that are strapped into the seatbelt, and the seatbelt's got a mechanism where it gets tighter and tighter. And as the day progresses, they feel even more strapped in to the physical position, but the mental frustration of being unable to escape. So how do you pause? How do you reset? How do you recalibrate? Where do you get your next energy from? How do you release your stress to get into a flow state in those pauses in the game? If you can learn how to do that, your performance will be off the scale.
Before we start, the Alpha Mind podcast is delighted to be sponsored by the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA, and their brilliant home study course, which is based on their diploma programme delivered annually at the world-renowned London School of Economics. If you want to up your game and learn technical analysis at the level the pros learn it, then consider the STA home study course. Alpha Mind listeners can obtain a £100 or your local currency equivalent discount on the cost of this course by visiting the Alpha Mind blog, which you can find at alphamindblog.blogspot.com or Google Alpha Mind blog, and then go to the page link STA Home Study Course, which will give you details of how to obtain the discount when you apply for the course. Now on with this week's podcast. Delighted this week to have on the Alpha Mind my usual co-host Mark Randall, who has stepped into the role as the guest today, and he's talking about something very dear to him, which is the idea of weaponizing the mind as a trader. Mark, welcome to the show as a guest. Can you explain what you mean by weaponizing the mind, and also how that applies to a trader or the role of traders?
Well, Steve, good to be on your show and a regular listener, as you know, and a happy new year to you as well. Well, we've mentioned weaponizing in several of our podcasts, and we mentioned in several conversations. We did it at the Energy Conference. And we were being told by them to frame our work in this weaponizing sort of way, because they felt it's what the audience wanted to hear. And we certainly hear that the concept of weaponizing the mind seems to fit very well with the trading community and other communities where peak performance is the theme. And we hear in sport an awful lot about weapons now. I mean, the commentators talk about, your best weapon, your most effective weapon. And we're now leading that conversation in trading, because we think, trading is a performance sport. Let's call it a sport, activity, hobby, whatever it is for you, however you apply your wisdom to trading. But of course, we start to look at trading in terms of weaponizing the weapon, which is, I guess, the trade, the eventual trade to market, and that warhead. There are lots of options for that warhead. The representative of the risk size to market. You can go nuclear. You can have a 500 pound bomb, or you could have 100 clusters going out there to represent your impact on the market and how you want to put a trade on. But of course, all those things need to come out of a system. So the weapons system is vital to understand. And perhaps in trading, people spend too much time looking at the warhead and not enough time looking at the weapon system, because the weapon system needs to be the radar, the sort of the awareness of understanding where you want to put that weapon, the speed that weapon needs to travel at to get to the market, its access point, the framework and base, that the launch platform that weapon's lifting off from, which is pretty much us. Yeah, it's us. We don't pay attention enough to our launch platform, about how stable we are, to be able to launch, a weapon from with a designed warhead to get to destination. We don't pay enough attention to our launch platform and our weapon system that surrounds us. And we're now starting to realize that the conversation and the people out there listening want to talk more about that. Okay, so people are engaged with us saying, we want to hear more about this. We want to hear about weapon system. We want to realize that, we've got stuff around self-development we need to do. We've got stuff around coaching we need to do. We've got stuff around our perception of the market, our understanding of the market, our understanding of the enemy, as it were, yeah? And we know that there is a huge deficit in the amount of time and money people are investing in that training in the market. Even people that have been in the market years, they may have a pretty useless platform from which they're trading. So this weapon system, this launch platform, is so important. And then you've got to start thinking about, well, what does the enemy look like? What does the marketplace look like that you're dropping this warhead into? And, is it a defense? And do you have a defensive strategy? Obviously, you've got an offensive push, but also if you get pushed back, so if the market pushes back against you and it starts to, so it's sort of pushed away your ability to effectively deal with the market because you've misdesigned your warhead, or you've just put the wrong sort of risk into a trade. It all starts going pear-shaped. Well, what's your defensive strategy? Because the market is then attacking you. And as soon as you're getting, and you need to be pretty smart with your defense, and fouling quickly and getting up and recovering, all that type of stuff, which is part of your defensive program, to be able to go on the offensive again. So if you want to be fighting in the market, you've got to be looking at weapon system, launch platform, the shape of the warhead, the navigation to that warhead. But of course, the other thing is that what's your trigger? What trigger are you pulling to get that risk into the market? It's all well and good saying, I'm going to go long. Okay, well, have you gone long already? Are you going to put a limit order in and join the bid? So I can tell you, as a seasoned broker, the number of fouled positions in the market because people they've joined the bid and actually they should have just taken the offer. If you think the thing's going up, just buy the bloody thing. Don't just join the bid. So that trigger is really, really important. There's no point building a weapon and you've got no process around, well, when and how am I going to deliver this?
So as I'm hearing this, this is about you. This is not about what you do. It's about the person behind it who's doing what they do. It's about optimizing that. It's about, you are, it's your mind, which is the thing which looks at everything, which observes everything, which senses everything, which feels everything, which is the mind that gets lost. We talk about losing our mind. I mean, how often does that happen in trading? So it's about managing that.
A bit more specific to that. The mind isn't just what's on top of your head, okay? It's your sphere of influence around you as well. So it's it's almost like you've got this aura around you, and what you connect to, as well as the mind on top of your head. It's almost like you've got these neuro pathways into a sort of a glowing you.
It's your whole system. It's your whole body. It's your whole body. It's your ability to sense, feel.
And what you influence as well, yeah.
what you influence. So it's a kind of like, it's almost like your body is an ecosystem that
Yeah,
is,
precisely.
the mind is a metaphor for that, and it goes beyond your physical self.
It's a metaphor, but mistaken by an awful lot of people. That
Yeah.
they don't understand just how broad the opportunity of the mind is, because they just kind of think it's this thing just above their eyes.
So as you were talking there, I was trying to relate it to the trader, the person listening to this, and they're thinking, what exactly is an analogy that I can use for this? And I was thinking of a swordsman, because you were talking about offense and defense. And, a master swordsman, I'm not talking about a fencer, but if you think of the image maybe of a Japanese warrior, he will have a sword and he will have a shield. And they use the sword for offense and the shield for defense. And at times you'll be using one and the other, and ideally you're using it smoothly together. So those are the physical weapons. As a trader would probably be your system and your capital and your risk management and your money management. That's the mixture of that together. And those are the physical weapons that we could see and observe. And we could learn techniques and methods. They, I suppose, are the analysis or some sort of automated system that underlies that. But it all comes back to the person wielding those physical instruments, those person doing the analysis, the person within that. And the great swordsman, it's about him, it's about his mind. And that takes years, many years, to cultivate and become a master. And eventually they're developing this metagame of swordsmanship where they're just, they are masters, and they could take on literally 2 or 3 people at the same time and still come out on top. And that's about them. It's about their mind. It's about their being. And I'm wondering if that's the analogy here, that somehow, whether that works or whether it's kind of fits into this idea of the trader as a system and weaponizing the mind.
Yeah, and it's not a steady state. The enemy is always changing. So you've got the need for evolution and learning, as you talked about, the swordsman, learning new tricks, new ways of killing. So, the craft of it all.
It's evolving, isn't it? Because it's always changing. As you learn techniques and systems, your enemy will learn new ones to try and overcome you. So you have to evolve and adapt with that.
And I harp on about gaming, perhaps too much, but it is kind of like being in a gaming environment, where, if you're in a game, now it's not the same, I know, but if you're in a game, where are your strengths coming from? Well, you're picking up kind of tokens en route, and these little chalices of power that add to your power, that give you more lives, and those little bits and pieces, those little nuggets that appear within the game, and you're kind of looking for them and want them, because you know that you get more powerful from these little techniques, perhaps in a way of trading, little techniques, new learnings, new ideas, new methods. Some of them are defensive, some of them are offensive and make you go faster, some of them give you more lives, and of course you get killed in games, but we know you get killed in trading. You lose and it becomes painful, but in a game, it's the speed of recovery and its ability to recover quickly and get on and to carry on that's really, really important. And that's very, very important with trading as well. To keep on, to dwell on failing is perhaps one of the biggest failures of the people that have difficulty trading. The dwelling on failure and not letting go of it and getting back into that observational, creative mindset that's then intelligence gathering about, okay, where's my next trade? And go up, that military analogy creeps back in there, that it's about, little battles, yeah, but you've got a bigger war that's going on.
So I'm just going to put a scenario out there. You're a trader. You're a young trader. You're just, I suppose, starting or close to the beginning of your career. And you've come into this job and you've got yourself a couple of screens. You've signed up a nice brokerage deal. You've learned a few basics of the game. You've been doing it maybe a year or two. You've had some good runs in that time. You're not really consistent. You've given back a lot. You had a couple of large drawdowns, which have seen all that decent profit you accumulated whittled away, and you're sitting there now frustrated. And, how do I do this job? How do I make it? How do I become good at it? And then you read books and you go on more courses and more programs. And my belief, and having been there myself, is that we're thinking there's always an answer out there, whereas what I think you're saying is that no, the answer's inside you.
Absolutely.
It's the mind. How do you go around developing that? How do you go around cultivating that? Because it's not tangible. It's not something you can easily do.
No, not at all. And there's not been much written about it either. I think but books are great, but even the books that I'm told are the best books, crikey, our attention wanes and we go daydreaming and we don't pay attention to what's written not a lot of the time. So face-to-face coaching is I would suggest, even with some of the webinars that we're looking at, is definitely the way to go. But in a way, the problem is that these these traders that have got this frustration have spent too much time designing their warhead and not enough time designing the whole weapon system and launch platform from which that warhead is being deployed. Okay, so, and what we do in the work that we do, it's that we look at what that weapon system looks like for each individual, because each individual is going to be quite different. There's going to be some commonality, but there's going to be some things in it that are going to be bespoke to that individual. And quite frankly, someone needs to sit down with you and interrogate, is that the right word? Investigate, have an inquiry around just what you look like in that system. Because if your system purely is about, well, how many blooming bullets have I got, or whatever, then you're failing at the basic principle that that's often where people start. How many bullets, and let's just fire them off and see what happens. But if you're serious about this,
how does this gun work?
Yeah, exactly. Where do I point it? And when do you pull the trigger? All those types of things. You need to go back to the base principles and create the right base from which to be launching your trades from, launching your weapons from. If you've not had thought around that whole system, then I think you're going to be very rarely successful in these markets.
So that's a fascinating point, and I think there's I don't know how long it is for traders, but I think there's a point somewhere in their learning after a few years normally. I don't think it comes at the beginning, where they realise, damn, this game is about me and how I do it, not what I do. I've got all the kind of recipes and formulas here. I've got all the equipment, but where do I go to learn this stuff? And at the moment, we try to provide that service through our podcasts, and we will at some point be launching some programs which people can join. We do individual coaching, but it is out. I know it's slightly out of the reach of most. We work in the professional sector generally, so it's out of the reach of most retail traders. But where, or what is the missing ingredient? And I face this challenge when I talk to retail traders. They want to work on this, they don't know how. They also want to do it without any investment. They've normally got a finite amount of resources or money. And they think, I can do this. There's almost a problem there. I'm talking off the top of my head here, Mark. There's almost a problem I see, which is they think, I can read it from a book. I'll read Market Wizards. I'll read Mark Douglas and a few others. And they're brilliant books, but you can only read so much, and you're reading about it, but you're not doing it yourself. That was a problem I faced. If I go back to my trading years, I used to pick up Market Wizards every few years because I knew the problem was something to do with psychology. But what happened was every time I'd read it, I'd come across lots of notes I'd scribbled on the book, sometimes yellow sticky notes I'd left on pages, where I was like, this interview or this chat that Jack Schrager's had with someone, maybe Ed Sequoia or something, it was really powerful, and it got to me, and it told me I should be doing this and listening to this and heeding this and bringing it into who I am. And yet, within days or weeks of me reading it, I'd completely forgotten it all and was back into the habits and behaviours I was doing, which I was repeating and which I was then going back to the book to read again. And yet I did nothing about it. This was my whole point, which I'm trying to get to. Even though I knew about it, I just repeated the same old habits and same old behaviours, which were holding me back from advancing. And I was a professional trader, and yet I wasn't doing something. Now, there was no avenue at the time to do it either. There was, I didn't know where to go. I heard of some people who went to psychologists and psychotherapists and coaches, but I wasn't even sure where to start with that. But I think people are starting to take it more seriously. I think people are starting to think, I do need to invest in myself. I do need to take some sort of action. There's only a limit I can do myself.
Yeah, I think take it more seriously, what it actually is. If you look at the sort of the background psychology and all those sorts of things, the common denominator to everything in this space in terms of performance is how you manage your stress. Okay, don't manage your stress, fall apart. Your observational opportunity falls apart. Your risk of doing things just from bad habits increases. Frustration increases, which then increases stress, then ruins sleep. That then, and it becomes a vicious circle. So the absolute fundamental sort of hack, if the hack's the right word, is actually if you can manage your stress better and get into a flow state more often. This flow state is where actually you've reduced stress to very, very background, and you've increased your awareness and you've increased your intuition. So you're doing things in a really powerful, almost balletic way without effort in high performance environments. That's what you want to get to. Now, you can't get to that if you're stressed. So actually, if you start to look through it, and certainly when in our heyday, did anyone ever ask the question, "Well, how are you managing your stress, Steve?" And it wasn't even on the agenda, right? And of course, stress then leads to I think probably rephrased it as mental health in the in the last few years. It's about mental health. Actually, fundamentally, it's about how you manage your stress.
Just coming in very quickly to remind our listeners that the Alpha Mind podcast is sponsored by the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA. If you're serious about trading and you're serious about developing yourself as a trader, do look into their home study course. It is based on the diploma program which they run at the world-renowned London School of Economics. You can find out more about it on the Alpha Mind blog. Just Google Alpha Mind blog or go to alphamindblog.blogspot.com. And there you can find out how listeners to the Alpha Mind podcast can get a discount on the full cost of this online course. Thank you, and back to the podcast. No one's doing it, and do you know what? I'm conscious that as we're talking, our next episode that's coming up is a terrific podcast episode we've recorded already with Mike Bellafiore of SMB Capital, the founder of SMB Capital. And within that, we're going to talk a lot about the benefits of being in an organization, being in a prop trading firm, having people around you, and if you can get into an organization and work with other people, there's a hidden benefit that's not seen. And that benefit is, you're being supported all the time. You're being mentored unconsciously all the time, or you're even maybe mentoring others, which is helping you. And I go back to some of my most stressful times when I was a trader, where I would have a colleague or a manager come over to me and give that metaphorical arm around the shoulder, which would snap you out of a really bad mental state you were in. You kind of go into this spiraling. 1 minute you're doing well, you see a great trade, you put a nice trade on, it's going okay, and then you take your profit, and then the market takes off, and you feel like an idiot. So you go back in without thinking, and you buy it. At which point it turns around and it comes flying off, and you've taken a big loss, and you're giving away the profit you had. You're now underwater. You sell it, and then it bounces up, and you buy it again, and you're thinking, you're acting without thinking now, and you're owned at this point. And this pattern, this spiral, tends to go on for sometimes days, weeks, even months. And you lose yourself in it. You lose yourself in that. You lose yourself in that moment, which then just carries on, and the stress builds up, and then you're not seeing the market. And I think every trader gets into that at some point. The game does that to you. We can't help it. We're playing solitaire. There's no one around us. Even in organizations that happens. But at least you have that supportive element around you. And like I say, I've had great colleagues, friends, managers came over to me, and they probably didn't even realize they were doing it, but they would help me in some way. They'd say, Steve, don't worry, you're going to I can see you're struggling a bit. You look quite tense. This will come back. You always make it back, Steve. Don't worry about it. And that kind of snaps you out of those moments. And then you step back, and, you have that happening for you by being surrounded by people. But most of the traders listening there, they're sitting at home. They're on their own. They're playing solitaire. That's what I mean by there is no one else. They're facing that screen. They're facing that market, but it's numbers on a screen. There is no one around them, and they're losing it. They're kicking the table, and they're not even realizing they're kicking the table underneath. They're getting angry and frustrated. There is no one to pull them out of that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that, when I hear you saying weaponizing the mind, that's creating that ability to do that yourself, to look after yourself.
Well, that's what I found. And I discovered that. It's a much regurgitated story in the late 1980s. And, through, the NatWest, the Greenwich period, the RBS period, and the various market volatilities of the late 80s, 90s, noughties, there was a lot of stuff going on that was bad, and a lot of people around me losing their heads. But the person that wasn't losing their head was me. And people were saying, how the hell are you so calm whilst all this is going on? And that won me business. So that won me business. It won me respect, because actually I'd managed to learn in decades ago a method of managing myself. And that became my weapon. So that became one of the things in my armory, was that method of managing self that was in itself a weapon that I was using, and the weapon that other people were almost feeling against them, because actually you are in a group of peers, right? And actually performance is important. And I was standing out whilst others were caving in to all sorts of pressures. And you can look at that in trading environments. You can look at that in any type of environment, really. So, part of your weapon system is managing your stress. Part of your weapon system is the need for some sort of social connectivity, even overlapping with another weapon system to acquire, inherit new skills. And like we're going to hear in the might be a Ferrari piece yet to come, but the concept of performance increasing when you buddy up with someone that's a couple of generations younger to incite a different type of weapon. So you're modifying and bringing to market a new weapon based upon collaboration.
And this has a value. We don't see it. You spoke about a few minutes ago that there were people around you losing their mind, and probably in some cases maybe even losing or curtailing their career, or not advancing. and well, alive because they made bad choices, unfortunately. But or not advancing their career, so there was an opportunity cost, and this has a value. Now, I'm going to give an example of this, okay, just to demonstrate. Someone I coached many years ago who contacted me last year for some more coaching. He was a hedge fund manager, and I'd worked with him for a year in 2015, and then I hadn't heard from him for 6 years. And then he came back to me and said he'd like to work with me again. And then he told me that in the time, his average performance from before when he worked with me compared to afterwards had doubled. So he was a 4% a year, 4 to 5% a year hedge fund manager, which in the firm he worked with, the volatility pattern he worked with was quite decent. But he felt he could double that. He was holding back. He was missing out. And I worked with him for a year. We looked at all aspects of his work, how he thought about his work, how he approached his work. And then what he revealed to me last year was that he has been, on average, working at double performance levels since I stopped working with him. Now, this individual runs $250 million of capital. Okay, so let's just assume he's moved from 4% to 8%. That's 4% extra a year. For his firm, he's been making $10 million extra per year. Okay, he gets 10% of that as a bonus. So he's been making an extra $1 million a year. So his little investment in coaching, relatively small investment in coaching, produced over 6 years about $6 million of extra income for him. Now, of course, he's a hedge fund manager. He's trading in vastly more capital than the people that we're doing. But you're someone who comes to Mark Randall for coaching, and you have, $50,000 of capital maybe, or $100,000 of capital, or maybe 25 million because of leverage. That 25 million maybe levered up 4 or 5 times, and it's really somewhere from 100 to 125,000. And you could make significantly more each year, every year, by working with you in a coaching program. But you're not seeing that cost. You're thinking, how much more do I make on my trading if I get this trend line break right? You're not seeing how much more you can make by working on your mind. You don't think of it like that.
I coached, actually, thinking back, I was actually inadvertently coaching one of my clients. Now, he had a $10 billion portfolio. That was a pension portfolio. And he worked at an institution where essentially I think his progress was something ridiculous. He went from like an admin job to a desk job to being a manager of a bunch of people to suddenly being a portfolio manager. Things happen, right? Funny things happen. $10 billion worth of fund, and he didn't know how to trade and I had to build a base with him. My base had 2 philosophies. One was to tell him about market behavior, product behavior, and the other thing was about himself, because he was a tennis player, and so we started to relate the way he played tennis to the way he was going to start trading, and about what flow state meant, what sort of recovering from a net call or whatever, something that worked against him, and recovering quickly and just putting it away and just carrying on. And actually he became very successful. He made errors on the way, but he learned. But he saw a massive uptick in his performance and became one of the best portfolio managers across the world for this particular business. It was a global business, because he actually took time to build his base appropriately. And I think that's what it's all about. And that base was product knowledge, it was methodology, but there's a whole chunk of it that was about himself.
And so this has a real positive return.
Yeah, and it's finding that something that he understood and then kind of relating his trading to it, and then progressing his trading development based upon his love of tennis. strangely enough. But the overlaps were very, very interesting, particularly with how he was fouling. So he would be fouling quicker and getting onto the next trade quicker after perhaps a year than at the beginning. He'd foul and almost give up his job. I think a lot of people like that in trading. That sometimes, if you're working so close to something, as portfolio managers do, hedge fund managers do, you're kind of locked in with your seatbelt into your role. And actually, the smart people have a seatbelt that they unclick every now and then. They get out of their seat and they, can do something else. It's the people that are strapped into the seatbelt, and the seatbelt's got a mechanism where it gets tighter and tighter. Yeah,
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
And they feel, even as the day progresses, they feel even more strapped in to the physical position, but the mental frustration of being unable to escape. Even understanding this, in tennis you have these breaks, and it's using these break in between points. So you're not, when you play tennis, you don't play tennis all the time, right? You have a moment where, okay, the boy goes to get the ball, or you go and get the ball, and you have that moment of walking up to the service line to do your serve. There are these moments of natural break within games, most games, trading included, right? And it's what you do in that space in between performance that really, really matters. So how do you pause? How do you reset? How do you recalibrate? Where do you get your next energy from? How do you release your stress to get into a flow state in those pauses in the game? If you can learn how to do that, your performance will be off the scale.
And that has a value, a huge value. And this is the point I'm saying. And yet it's very rare for people to invest in that value. As we say, buying another trading psychology book doesn't help. You're just reading more and more about you. And I say that as someone who's writing a book on those subjects. But, at the end of the day, you need to go and do something. You need to make a change. And if that's not a physical move, if that's not working with someone to help you, you're just going to be locked into the same habits, the same behaviors, the same mindset. You might break them for a week or two, but then you're going to go back if you don't have someone working with you on that. And that's really the value of investing in this. So where can people approach you directly to find out about working with you?
Well, AlphaMind102 on Twitter, you can contact me on that, or if you go to the alpha-mind.net, you'll find all of our contact details there. And I think that if you do want someone to look at your launch platform, your weapon system, to identify what needs to be enhanced, to be changed, to be relearned, to be discovered, or to actually have a framework of putting it together, then weapon system consultant is who I am. So,
and how if someone contacted you and you wanted to explain how you would and could work with them, what might that look like? What might a person working with you go through? What might they experience? How often do they contact you? How long does it last? All those sort of, what are the realities of those sort of programs?
The program does depend on each individual, but typically 10 or 12 sessions calibrated over time, perhaps one a week for the first 4, then spacing it out to one every 2 weeks, then one every month, and then a review, because then you've got to start applying it. So there'll be a period of time where you're on your own. You've been given this toolkit and this philosophy and these pointers. Okay, now go and apply it.
What does the engagement look like? So someone turns up to your first session with you. What are you going to be talking about with them? How are you going to be engaging with them? What What would they, if someone was just looking on high at that now, what would they see?
They'd see me listening. They'd see me. Tell me about you. How do you do you now? How the component of performance, but the components of you, and how do you manage you in life in general? Tell me about you, and I'll listen. I won't interrupt. I'll just listen, and there'll be a moment of quietness. I'll still be listening, and the more you listen, the more will evolve from that. And then as you start to understand the person, which could be a collective, incidentally, you could do this with a team in a similar sort of way, to understand the things that matter and the things that are getting in the way, and then start to framing an approach of rediscovery and rebuild, so that you start to call upon these things that have been noted, and you actually start to understand what outcomes the client's looking for, because the outcomes are not going to be what I presume. And of course we can presume, his outcome is to make more money, but his outcome might not be that. His outcome might be to be a better trader, to have a much more balanced approach to trading, to foul better, or to be a bit more broader in what he or she looks at, and how they approach the market. Outcomes could be very, very different per person, per team, and you then tailor an approach of essentially a journey. You'd get them to commit to a journey and invest in that journey. And I think you're right to say that it is an investment, and will be far more beneficial than buying a book.
And I know from knowing you well that a lot of your clients have got huge benefits from this.
Yeah.
What are some of the benefits, tangible benefits, that you could share that they've got out of going through this process with you?
Well, for some, one particular trader, absolute desperate state. Okay, desperate state. Quote, "I'm now in a much more positive place. Thank you."
And how was that being how was that appearing in his work over the time after the coaching, or through the coaching after?
In terms of what transpired as to the change.
Yeah, how did that manifest itself?
Someone that was brighter-eyed, that they were calmer, they were more engaging, they were more lucid in conversation. They were just more present to what was going on, rather than at the beginning they were hidden. They almost had a vow, and you had to take down that vow to understand what was going on behind. But that vow was in the way. That was a block. It was in fact, it was almost a wall. It was a wall for his engagement with the market.
Right.
He had, every now and then he had a brick. You could take a brick out of the way and he could see the market and he'd trade. But very quickly that wall would be back up, and he'd be banging his head against that wall because he wanted to break through that wall.
Yeah.
That was his challenge. And so we managed to dismantle that wall and to take down
that's the bit that you do not get from a book. That's the personal bit. That's the bit you don't get from trying to do it yourself, because you can't even see it.
Never read one book. I've never seen one book talk about that in the sense of the reality in markets and trading, about what that actually really means. Well, because we've been in the space for 70 years between us, God bless us, we kind of know what it means in that language. But when someone says, "I'm now in a much more positive place," you kind of know what place they were in before was a really, really, really bad place. And we've seen that in some of our podcasts, that people can get into really, really bad places. And not just that, but there are times that they can go back and revisit those bad places and be there again. It's just understanding how you deal with that process.
And that has, as we say, that has a value.
Massive.
That has a positive impact on their performance. P&L goes up, return goes up, and it keeps on going. It just builds upon itself. So, we're not just talking about airy-fairy things here, that people are happier, people are smiling more. This translates into bottom line.
Absolutely. It's performance. It's not about being happy and, cracky. A business would never survive if people were just happy. happy and smiley and clappy.
No,
Um,
it's real. It's tangible.
yeah, yeah, like I say, you need to get back to that concept of, which is why I like this going back to the weapon system way of dealing with the conversation, because people kind of will get it. They just get it because you're sort of using a system to define the answer rather than saying, you know, do this and be pointed and do this and do that. You don't want to be, giving those instructions. You want to be letting someone understand what that system looks like, and then at each point of that system, asking themselves, how can this be better? And what extra skill do I need for this to be really, really potent and an effective system that delivers that warhead, that trade to the market? That's where you want to get to.
You're bringing it back to you. You're weaponizing yourself. You're weaponizing your mind. And
You are
that,
you are the weapon.
yeah, yeah. Okay, listen, this has been brilliant. Now, I'm very excited to say that at some point, and we haven't got dates yet, we haven't got times yet, we are going to be producing a program for our audience. So obviously, the price of individual coaching can be beyond a lot of people who are doing it themselves, starting themselves. We get hundreds of requests all the time for the coaching, um, and and people asking for can I have an affordable version of it. So we are going to be coming up with something soon where people can join a group program. So maybe you could just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think it just works at all levels. Group program where we kind of solve for the masses. It's still meaningful, still powerful, still something that will be a great investment for people, because it's not going to be the sort of price of coaching. It'll be an affordable price for someone that's treating the market as a serious proposition. But of course, it also gives another dynamic. If you're doing it within a team, you start to build a degree of social connectivity within the team itself, and community for people that are often siloed, as we've said, as part of the system weapon system requirement is you kind of need to have, more than just you going on in terms of conversations. You need to be able to, have a joke and talk about the football or the cricket at the weekend or something every now and then. Because if you're not doing that in these pauses, and we'll go back to the power of these pauses, then you're just going to sit there looking at a screen and, with fidgety feet and strapped into an ever tighter chair that's got you locked in for the day, getting frustrated and high levels of stress. And going back to that's the ultimate problem what you want to try to avoid. So these programs, I think, they're wonderful, they're meaningful. There's nothing else out it like they're genuine, they're authentic, they're built upon years and decades of experience, from people that have learnt their craft very well, myself and Steve. So we're looking forward to doing it. We know that the population, the trading population, is in need of it, particularly one that's believable and is not a joke. And we know that there are lots of jokes out there. We see them regularly turn up on our YouTube feeds, and that's not where we are. We're going to be a genuine attempt to educate and rebase the knowledge of traders in the market.
And it's going to be limited numbers. So if people are interested to know more, when we know more or want to register for interest, just to put this out there now, just to email info@alpha-mind.net. To repeat that, that's info@alpha-mind.net. And just say you're interested in knowing more about the group coaching program. It will, as we say, be limited in numbers. At this stage, it's in the works, so it will definitely be happening. So please, as we say, if you want to register your interest and be one of the first people to be able to participate, we can send you more information when we have that. But it's going to be a great chance to really learn about and actually start weaponizing your mind.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, I think that was great. I gave a load of perspective, but easy to understand, right? When you look at things, it's easy to understand. Okay, yeah, I need to think about this. It's a mindset. In fact, if you look at it as a growth mindset application to this type of activity, where you're constantly looking and asking the question, I need to change this. I need to not just this habit's killing me, or these methods. I've got the method wrong. I need to rebase that method. All of that stuff is in this. So there we are. There's our bit on weaponizing. I hope you've enjoyed that short session. And we look forward to seeing you at some of the webinars. If you care to join us, we look forward to that.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And again, just to say, this is our starter podcast for the year. Last year was a bit of a crazy year in many ways, as was the year before. And I guess 2022 is going to hold some interesting surprises for us, I presume, as we go through it. So we just wish you the best of luck for your trading, and look forward to continuing our engagement with you. And if you're enjoying this and enjoying our content, we have a great back catalogue. Go onto iTunes, Spotify, or wherever, and check out some of our past podcasts as well. And other than that, just to wish you a great few weeks ahead of you and a great 2022. Thank you, Mark, for your time today.
Welcome. Take care, guys.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed the podcast, do give us an excellent rating in whichever podcast service you use. And if you can, do leave us a friendly review. If you hated it, well, then you can leave a not so friendly rating. Thank you to our sponsor, the Society of Technical Analysts, the STA, and their brilliant home study course. As a reminder, AlphaMind listeners can obtain a £100 or local currency equivalent discount on the cost of their brilliant technical analysis course, which is the course of choice in technical analysis for the top pros. Visit the AlphaMind blog, alphamindblog.blogspot.com, and go to the page link STA Home Study Course, which will give you details of how to obtain the discount. This podcast was presented by myself, Stephen Goldstein, and my co-host, Mark Randall. We are both professional trader coaches with many decades of market experience behind us. We work and deliver performance and mindset coaching to traders in investment firms, hedge funds, banks, commodity and energy trading businesses, prop firms, as well as to private retail traders. If you are keen to know more about our coaching services and how it can benefit you, then contact us through the webpage alpha-mind.net or email info@alpha-mind.net. You can follow and connect with us also on social media. Our Twitter handles are AlphaMind101 and AlphaMind102, and we are both available to be contacted and connected with on LinkedIn, and we also have a LinkedIn group, the AlphaMind group. Thank you so much, and stay safe and stay well.